This video will be about finding and estimating square roots. So before we can do that, we need to know what does it mean to find a square root. What is a square root? So the symbol of a square root is this kind of funny, it almost looks like the old school divide when you did long division, but has more of a check mark in front. And if I were to say square root of 16, what a square root is asking is what number multiplied by itself equals 16. Well, we know lots of numbers that multiply to be 16, 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 times 4, but we are looking for the numbers that multiply by itself. It has to be the same number. So none of those work except the 4. The square root of 16 would be 4. Now it can be kind of tricky because we could also say a negative 4 times a negative 4. Those are the same number, those are both negative 4, and multiplied together they still equal positive 16. So we actually have two possibilities, a positive 4 or a negative 4. So since we have two options, we have to know which one do we use. When you're working with equations, which will be later on, you'll have to use a certain one every time. For this, they have to tell you. If I give you just positive square root of 16, that's going to be positive 4. If I say negative square root of 16, that would give us our negative 4. And if I wanted both, I would have to put a plus or minus in front. Plus or minus square root of 16 is plus or minus 4. This is really saying the positive 4 or the negative 4. It's just the quicker, easier way to write it. The only one we don't see is square root of negative 16 with the negative inside instead of outside. That we can't do. Doesn't exist. So now that we know what a square root is, we can do some more complicated questions. If I said find the square root of 1 over 25. When we're dividing, we can actually take the square root of each piece on its own. I can say what is the square root of 1, and I can say what is the square root of 25. That only works if you're dividing or multiplying. If I had square root of 1 plus 25, I could not write it like this. This does not work ever. But dividing, we're fine to just do each individually. So I need to know what is the square root of 1. What's a number multiplied by itself that equals 1? Only thing that can happen for that is 1 times 1. So the square root of 1 is 1. Then I look at square root of 25. What number multiplied by itself equals 25? Again, there's only one answer. 5 times 5, so square root of 25 is 5. So the final answer would be 1/5. So it can be a good idea when you're working with radicals is to keep a chart. Just a list of all the square roots. We know square root of 1 is 1. We want to know what the next one is, so we're going to have to kind of think backwards. 1 times 1 made 1. 2 times 2 is 4, so square root of 4 would be 2. 3 times 3 is 9, so square root of 9 is 3. 4 times 4 is 16, so square root of 16 is 4. 5 times 5 is 25, so square root of 25 is 5. Square root of 36 would be 6. Square root of 49 would be 7. Square root of 64 would be 8. Square root of 81 would be 9. Square root of 100 is 10. Square root of 121 is 11. And square root of 144 is 12. That should be enough. If you want to make more, you would just have to keep multiplying. You'd have to say, okay, 13 times 13 is 169. So square root of 169 is 13. So you can make your chart longer, but those are the good ones to know. Now that we know all our square roots, we can estimate some numbers to see where they would be between. So let's say we want to know what the square root of 27 is? Well, right now, that's not on our list. If we go through our list again, square root of 1 was 1, 4 was 2, 9 was 3, 16 was 4, 25 was 5. That was pretty close. 25 is pretty close to 27, and 36 is 6. So we want to know specifically what consecutive integers square root of 27 is between. So first we have to figure out what is the square root between. Looking here, we know square root of 25, that was pretty close. So we have to decide, is 25 bigger or smaller than 27? Well, obviously, smaller. So 25 is smaller, it's less than 27. Which means square root of 36, that would be bigger. Well, we know the square root of 25 is 5. We know the square root of 36 is 6. That means square root of 27 is somewhere in between those two numbers. It's 5 point something. We don't even know what the rest is. We just know it's somewhere in between 5 and 6. So those are our answers, 5 and 6. What can also happen is they may want to know about a negative. Let's say we have negative square root of 8. Now negative numbers are kind of backwards from positive numbers, so that's why I want to talk about it. Something smaller than negative 8 would actually look like it's bigger because it's negative. If we look at the number line, we go 1, 2, 3, so smaller, bigger, bigger. With our negatives, negative 3 is actually smaller than negative 2. Even though the number 3 is bigger than the number 2 because of that negative sign, negative 3 is actually smaller than the number negative 2. So looking at this, we had our list. We can't see it right now, but we have to think about things near 8. Well, square root of 9, that was near 8, and we have to decide, is that going to be smaller or bigger now that we're working with negatives? Well, negatives are opposite of what we expect. Negative square root of 9 would actually be smaller than square root of 8, square root of negative 8. Then we think of anything else around 8. The other closest number would be the square root of 4. So negative square root of 4 is actually bigger than negative square root of 8. That means negative 3 is less than whatever the square root of negative 8 is less than negative 2. So those are the two consecutive integers that the square root of 8 would be between. Something else we can do with square roots is to find the square root using a calculator. I'm going to have to go to a different program to do this. So, I've been off so long it does not want to let me on. Oh good, I can still pull up the calculator though. So on the calculator, to get to the square root button, it's above the x squared button, and to access any of these buttons above we have to hit second. So we go second x squared, it brings up the square root symbol. This particular problem is asking for square root of 12. So we enter in the 12. Sorry, I don't have enough room to show the whole calculator. And then we just hit enter. Now, there's actually more numbers after what the calculator shows, but we can't keep writing numbers forever, so they just cut it off after so many, usually 9 or 10 decimal places. This asks us to estimate to the nearest hundredth. Well, decimal-wise, we have tenths is the first place after the decimal, and then hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, so on. So hundredths would be the 4, 6, so 3.46. The number next to it is a 4, so we leave the 6 alone. If it had been a 5 or higher, we'd round up to 3.47.